Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to yet another episode of Reading Time with Pickle with my adorable little nugget of a cat. Her name is Darkness Nugget, and she's already getting a bit jealous. I usually read with her, and I think it's bothering her that I'm reading to a webcam instead of her. Anyways, let's get right into it. Um, so far, we've read the first 5 chapters of Asylum by Madeleine Roux. I'm going to be honest, so far I'm not liking it too much. Just a few things right off the bat. I know we're still 5 chapters in. The character development, again, it's early in the novel. It's a bit weak in my opinion. Who's Dan? Who's Abby? Who's Jordan? I know I asked those questions, but really my point is there are no defining characteristics to them. Okay, sure. Jordan's gay and he's witty, and he has a level head. Abby is supposedly the hottest girl Dan's ever met. Oh, wow, great. She's artistic, and she also has a soft spot for little girls who've had lobotomies performed on them. And Dan's just honestly, Dan's kind of an asshole. I don't like his character. I'm not sure if I should, but that's kind of one of the weak points. There have been no defining moments yet. They're all kind of cookie cutter to me, in the same sense that so far this novel, it feels very scripted. It's about a kid who goes to a college prep school that turns out to be, I guess, an asylum back in the 60s, the 50s. And I think the point where we're headed is, as the reader, we're kind of taken on this mindfuck of a journey. Oh, is Dan crazy right now? Is Dan actually crazy? Or is he not? Is he just hallucinating things? There have been a lot of small hints dropped, which is fine. But in my personal opinion, they come too early. This kind of psychological thriller, at least in my opinion, should be a slow burn. Like, I shouldn't be getting hints in the second chapter that Dan might be crazy, etc. And, I could be completely wrong. And if I am, I will eat my words and apologize. But so far, what I don't like about this novel, and I hate to start off on a negative, but what I don't like about this novel is it seems very expedited, like scripted almost, really condensed. There hasn't been much character development. Just overall, the plot points seem very, almost even forced. It's like, okay, one thing after the next, after the next. There's no time to breathe. It almost doesn't feel natural. And I know I sound like I'm bashing the novel a lot. It is actually good. It's an easy read. Not necessarily a page turner, but it doesn't make you snore. And again, I know I am being a bit critical. If this were rather a novel I'm reading on my own, I might have quit by now. And I don't mean to sound like a snob or an asshole. But since we're doing this for Reading Time with Pickle, and since my cat is getting antsy, let's talk a bit about the good things so far, and get into the story. Number one, what I do like is actually that some hints are being dropped. I think it's a bit early, but at the same time, especially for a young adult, I understand it can be hard. And in the context of a young adult novel, sure, fine. Okay, it's good that we drop some hints here and there. Okay, let's say a 13-year-old's reading this book. I guess to drop one early on so that they'll catch on might keep the reader retention. What else do I like? Honestly, not much. I'm hoping to find some more. So let's just get started. I think we were on chapter 6. Actually, what I do like is the photographs are pretty good, and I think that the novel so far has done a great job integrating them into the story. We got in chapter 5, where Dan returned to his room, and suddenly he was teleported, or I guess hallucinating, a different room. Okay, so where were we? So where we left off in chapter 5 was Dan returned to his room, and he kind of did an internet search for the asylum. I think it is referred to as Brookline, and the most important piece of information, two things. He found a homemade, rather terrible web page created by supposed investigator slash hobbyist, and oh boy, ghost hunter Sal Weathers. Now, what we're also seeing in Sal's website, I'm sure Sal, or I hope Sal will become an important character later on, is that one of Brookline's most controversial patients was the serial killer Dennis Haimline, who would leave his victims posed as statues. So that's where we left off. So let's start chapter number 6. No offense, Dan, but you look like crap. Did you have trouble sleeping or something? Abby's voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a pool. Realizing he'd begun to nod off, Dan roused himself enough to lift his head and shove a bite of cereal into his mouth. He wondered if the halo of fuzzy light that looked so at home around her head was from the morning sun through the skylight, or from his almost total lack of sleep. He decided against telling Abby about what he'd found online, because he was worried it would sound too weird, that it would make him sound too weird. He was only just getting to know her. He didn't want to blow it in the first 24 hours. Felix snores, like he swallowed a frog or a lion. That bad? Yeah. And then he was up at the crack of dawn to go work out, of all things. Needless to say, I don't think I'll be getting much sleep this summer. You sure you're not just worn out from our little ordeal last night? She didn't beat around the bush. He liked that. I guess it was pretty intense, he said. She had certainly seemed enamored by that one photo. They'd almost had a fight over it. Dan frowned. He couldn't even remember now why he'd been so adamant about her leaving it there. A stab of pain in his head made his eye twitch. Damn it. I did not want to feel like this on the first full day. Abby pushed a cup of coffee across the table. Try that. It's strong enough to fuel a jet. He turned to the cup, careful to avoid the little smudge of pink she'd left on the rim. He took a sip and tasted something between lighter fluid and maple syrup, and rushed to swallow before the sweet sludge could make its way back out. Wow, how do you drink that? I actually hate the taste of coffee, but the sugar helps cover it up, she admitted. And you can't be an artist and not drink coffee. It's just not done. Every installation I've ever gone to is either coffee or wine, so you've got to suck it up and deal. Dan laughed. Abby didn't seem like she cared if she fit in or not, but maybe everyone made a few concessions here and there. Just last year, he'd broken down and bought a tan corduroy blazer to wear to a community college lecture on Jung's last years. He'd sat in a sea of tan and navy sports jackets, wondering what his favorite psychoanalyst would say about so many people trying so desperately not to stand out. Hey, Dan said, forcing a smile as he sat up straighter. He remembered something Abby said yesterday. So you took a bus here? Dan had flown from Pittsburgh and then taken a taxi from the tiny airport that looked like it had just one runway. A couple buses, actually. Pops couldn't take the time off, but it's no trouble. Bus, train, subway. It's all second nature when you're from New York. And that's where Jordan's from, too? No, Jordan was coming from Virginia. We shared the last leg of the trip. That's an awfully long ride. Why didn't he fly? Oh, his parents got him plane tickets, all right, Abby said. But they were to California, Not New Hampshire. Dan raised his eyebrows. Apparently, they think he's at some Pray the Gay Away camp or something right now. His uncle is paying for his program, and he used the cash from his part-time job to buy the bus ticket. Abby drained the remaining coffee and finished the last of her oatmeal. But what if his parents find out? What happens then? Abby frowned. Beats me, World War III? No wonder Jordan was so afraid of getting kicked out. Dan felt grateful for his open-minded and easygoing parents, strict as they could be sometimes. He always felt like he'd lucked out with Paul and Sandy, even before they'd officially adopted him. Lots of kids weren't so fortunate. It's nice he has you here to talk about it, he said. Abby was so easy to be with. It was no surprise that Jordan confided in her. We just get each other. We're connected. Abby gathered her things. The buzz of voices in the cafeteria died down as the students ambled outside. All of them headed to registration. It was a long bus ride, not much to do but play hangman and chat. I'm sure he would have opened up to you, too. Maybe, Dan said, although he highly doubted it. Anyway, he better not miss registration or he'll be forced to open up to Felix in advanced bioethics. Be nice, said Abby, but she was smiling. They filed out behind the other students, grabbing their backpacks from cubbies placed just outside of the cafeteria entrance. Apparently, you weren't allowed to bring your bags inside because college kids had a habit of making off with a whole week's worth of croissants and fruit cups. Seriously, though, said Dan. This morning, Felix asked if I wanted to swap schedules for a buddy system or something. Then, when I finally gave in and showed him the classes I wanted, I could tell he was embarrassed for me. Not enough hard science, I guess. Abby laughed. Yeah, thanks. Laugh at the misery. Dan sneezed when they stepped outside. Bless you. Thanks. Hey, I was actually thinking, though, what if we took a class together or something? You, me, and Jordan, I mean. I know you're here for art, but maybe I could convince you to take a history class, he asked. The dormitories spread out on either side of them, forming an almost perfect ring around the grassy quad. Chairs littered the shade under the biggest tree in the quad, while the benches lining the path were empty now. He imagined they would all be filled later. He'd overheard a few kids in the cafeteria talking about having a lawn bowling tournament after registration. Sure, why not? Meanwhile, I've got to make sure I grab a spot in life drawing. Do you want me to sign you up? Me? That's all right. You've never seen me draw. It's worse than stick figures. Is there something worse? Whatever it is, that's my skill level. Dan shook his head, imagining the look on the instructor's face when he turned in his scribbles. There'll be naked girls, Abby said, drawing out the last word teasingly. And naked guys, he replied. Good point. Oh, maybe Jordan will sign up with me. They passed through the quad and the path divided into two. One leading to the admin building where they were going to register for classes, and the other to the sports center. Up ahead, Dan spied Felix coming from the gym, pale and upright, walking to the registration on his own. Dan thought about calling out to him, and really felt that he should, but to be perfectly honest, he was having a good time just being alone with Abby. Hey losers, wait up! So much for being alone. Jordan ran up the path, a sleek-looking leather satchel slung diagonally across his chest. A keychain with a 21-sided die hung from the satchel zipper. Jordan looked like he'd just rolled out of bed and thrown on whatever was at hand. Yet somehow he made Dan feel like the sloppy one. Where were you? Abby asked, slipping her arm through Jordan's. We missed you at breakfast. Overslept. How was the food? Gross, probably. Jordan walked quickly and they had to trot a bit to keep up. It wasn't bad, actually, Dan answered, although he wasn't sure Jordan really cared about the answer. Jordan was hard to read, he thought. One minute he was up, and the next he was acting all snide. And then there was the Jordan who was so afraid of getting kicked out and going home. Although Abby's coffee was a diabetic's nightmare. Dan's just grumpy because his roommate shamed him over his class choices this morning. Shamed? What the hell? How's that any of his business? Jordan laughed. You lost the roommate lottery, Danny boy. Me? I won it. Yee, it's good stuff. He played the cello for me this morning. Jordan waved to a tall, disheveled guy who was setting up his cello on the grass. He's getting together a chamber music group to play outside on the lawn. Can you imagine? I mean, can we hurry up and get to college for real, please? I want cello every morning. I want this. He swept his hand out in front of him. It sure beats living under the Taliban's. I'm so ready for it. You shouldn't wish away your life, Abby said smugly. You only get it once. Not if you're a Buddhist or a ghost, but you're right. Who wants to get old? Not me. I'll be handsome, of course, distinguished, but still, wrinkles? Back pain? No thanks. He tweaked Abby's nose. At least you'll be gorgeous forever. Dan couldn't argue with that. Dan, on the other hand, already looks middle-aged, Jordan continued, chuckling again. In a good way. Don't hit me, in a good way. Look at you over there, all quiet and earnest and crap, wise beyond your years, man, like a hot, skinny Buddha. Thanks? Dan looked at his feet, his face growing warm. He didn't particularly want anyone, especially Abby, thinking of Buddha when they looked at him. Is he blushing? I think he's blushing. Jordan cackled and sped up, tugging Abby swiftly along the sidewalk, forcing Dan to hurry to keep pace. Leave him alone, Jordan. She turned to Dan with an apologetic smile. Don't worry, you don't look middle-aged to me. He's just trying to rile you up. From the state of his face, I'd say it's working, Jordan said. You're awfully chipper this morning, Abby said. Not bad dreams after last night? Jordan shook his curly head. Me? No, I slept the slept of the innocent. It's probably from being away from home. Dan thought of his own night and the sleep he definitely hadn't gotten. He seemed to be the only one whom the basement had really affected. He was also the only one who had dug deeper into the asylum's history. He didn't want Abby and Jordan to think he'd gone all obsessive, and was glad he hadn't said anything to Abby. It was time to change the subject before he said something he'd regret later. So Jordan, Abby and I were just talking about what classes we want to take. Okay. Well, we were just thinking of some we might take together. You interested? Sure, Jordan said, although he took out his phone and began texting at light speed with only his thumb, turning away slightly to shield the screen from them. Dan didn't give it a second thought. Who Jordan texted was his own business. Talk of courses carried them the remaining distance to registration. Dan's mood lifted with every step. Abby and he agreed on 2 classes together, but while Abby and Jordan were talking life drawing, Dan would be in history of psychiatry. He probably knew a lot of the subject matter already, but he knew classes at NHCP were designed to push even the smartest kids. Posted on a wooden pillar off to the side of the admin building were flyers for a harp concert and a live-action role-playing demonstration and casual bocce ball match. The morning mist had yet to burn off, and the students milling around looked almost like ghosts in a dream, a good dream. Can you imagine doing this every day? Dan said. Picking classes? No, it's exhausting. Abby slipped her course's catalog back into her patchwork messenger bag. No, I mean this. Walking around campus on a nice day with kids who actually want to be here. Going to classes you actually want to take. Amen, said Jordan. Amen too, said Abby, and she linked arms with Jordan and Dan. Dan was content with himself for once. He had 2 new friends and classes he was actually excited to attend. One day in, the summer was looking up. After registration, the students were split into a few smaller, more manageable groups and funneled into the rooms off the main floor of Wilford Commons. The director of the program was there to help guide the flow of traffic, waving and joking with a few of the professors who idled out in the hall. Inside their designated room, the friends were greeted by a professor and a red-headed guy who was handing out information on the various services available to them, emergency numbers, and maps of campus. The guy seemed to recognize Jordan, greeting him with a friendly, "What's up?" before moving on to the next kid in line. Haven't we heard this all 1,000 times already? Jordan groused as they took their seats. A dozen or so rows of chairs had been set up in front of a pull-down screen. They sat at the end of the third row, backpacks tucked under their feet. I mean, I know I read this somewhere already, the pamphlets, the website. Some of these kids have never been away from home before, Dan replied. Abby sat between him and Jordan, perusing a neon green handout. Have you? Abby asked. It was a friendly conversational question, but Dan froze, not sure how to answer. He didn't like to talk about the foster homes he'd been in before lucking out with Paul and Sandy. He was glad when the professor motioned for everyone to be quiet, waiting by the projector until the students had stopped talking. That's Joe, Jordan said, nodding toward the stocky, red-headed student. He's a hall monitor on my floor. Kinda cute. A hall monitor? No way, Abs. That's forbidden fruit. Haha, fruit, get it? Fortunately, yes, Abby muttered, rolling her eyes. I crack me up, Jordan added, wiping away a non-existent tear. That makes one of us. A dark-haired girl sitting ahead of them turned and glared, silencing Abby and Jordan with a look. Behind her back, Jordan stuck out his tongue as the professor finally started talking. This is Joe McMullen, and I'm Professor Rees. I know you're all probably very bored with orientation and stuff, but this will be quick and painless, I promise. Her name sounded familiar. Dan reached quietly into his pocket and pulled out his schedule. Scanning the list, he found out that she was his history of psychiatry professor. He tucked the schedule away, fixing his attention to the front of the room again. She was shorter than Joe by at least a head, and looked approachable enough, with ruddy cheeks and a gap in her teeth. She wore all black, accented by a chunky necklace of turquoise stones. First, a few words on dorm safety. Dan let his eyes wander around the room. A few seats down, he saw Felix sitting bolt upright in his chair. He sighed, thinking he really ought to include his roommate more, and maybe see if an hour or two of kicking back as a group would bring Felix out of his shell. But he genuinely liked what he had going with Abby and Jordan, and if Felix made things weird, Dan would be blamed for forcing him into the dynamic. Brookline has a rich and complex past, Professor Reyes was saying. So if you have any questions, ask any time. History is nothing to be afraid of. Chapter number 7. It was wrong, all wrong. Dan was in the wrong place. There must have been some mistake. He didn't deserve to be here. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't. So why was he chained to the wall? He struggled until there was blood on his wrist from where the shackles held him. Help! He screamed, but his voice came out in a whisper. The room changed. Now Dan was lying on a table in a robe. A key clicked in the door, and a waiter wearing glasses and a white serving uniform came in, rolling a tray in front of him. There was a big silver dome on the tray, and Dan could hear something under it, tinkling and rattling like silverware. "Your dinner, sir," the waiter said, removing the dome. Underneath were surgical instruments, a scalpel, a clamp, and a hypodermic needle. Dan looked up, and the waiter's face had changed. Now he was wearing a white doctor's coat and a surgical mask. Worst of all, where his eyes had been, there were only black sockets, as if his eyes had been scratched out. As he reached for the instruments, the doctor said in a gentle voice, "Don't worry, Daniel Crawford. I'm here to take care of you." Dan startled awake. Sweat was pouring down his face, and he had grabbed the sheet so tightly that his fingers were cramping. He was still muttering, "No, no, don't hurt me." Heart pounding, he sat up. His eyes adjusted to the darkness slowly. He was in his room. There was no waiter, no doctor. There was only Felix, stock still, standing beside the bed, watching him. "Ah!" He sank down into the pillow again and yanked the sheet up to his chin. What are you doing?" "You were speaking in your sleep, Daniel," Felix replied calmly. He took a tiny step away from the bed. "Are you feeling all right? The noise was, well, it woke me, as you can see." "Sorry," Dan mumbled. "It was just a nightmare. I'm fine, really." "But I'd be better if you back the hell away." "I need some air," he added, rolling out of bed. The sheets were damp with sweat. "That should help," Felix said with a sad smile. "Fresh air always clears my thoughts. I hope it does the same for you." Dan grabbed his hoodie and raced out the door, wondering if he was fleeing his roommate, the room, or both. He tried to slow down his breathing. It was just a dream. That's all it was. He wiped sweat from the bridge of his nose with one knuckle. The photographs had clearly disturbed him more than he'd realized. For the second night in a row, sleep was a lost cause. The hallway was dimly lit and quiet. No one was there, but Dan shivered. What was it about this place that made him feel like he was being watched? It felt good to get downstairs, but when he got to the entrance hall, the main door was already propped open. Someone had gone out before him and was now sitting on the steps. "Funny meeting you here," he said. Abby yelped, surprised. Dan only just managed to dodge the pebble she picked up and chucked in his direction. "Dan! Ah! You scared me half to death." Probably didn't help that his bad dream and sudden waking had left his voice hoarse. "Sorry," he said, sitting down next to her. "Didn't mean to make you jump." Abby sat with her knees drawn up and her phone in one hand, her arms wrapped tight around her shins. Little fat clouds with smiles decorated her pajama pants. "You're up late," she said. "You're up late," she said. Her voice sounded ragged, too. "Couldn't sleep. You?" Abby looked at him as if weighing how to respond. Finally, she said, "I got a text from my sister. Well, several texts. Things at home they could be better." She paused. Dan might not have been a social wizard, but he knew that asking questions was not the right thing to do just now. So he waited for Abby to go on. "My parents don't see eye to eye on much. Pops does corporate jingles and he hates it, but the money's good. Mom thinks he should go back to making real music, his music, but it doesn't pay. No easy answers there. They go back and forth, and every time I get so freaked out thinking that they'll... Anyway, Jessie thinks it's for real this time. She thinks they'll really do it. Abby sighed. What? Divorce? Sensitive, Dan, real sensitive. Yeah, she sighed again, and this time he heard a catch in her breath. He had no idea what to do if she started crying, and he hoped like hell it wouldn't come to that, because he wouldn't know the right way to handle it. It would kill my sister. Sometimes I think it would kill me too. That really sucks. I'm sorry. He was flubbing this epically. Not that it was an appropriate time to be acting all smooth and seductive or whatever, but surely something deeper was required here. I wish they could just keep it together for a few more years until Jessie and I are both in college. Dan sat in what he hoped came off his sympathetic silence. So what about you? She asked, tilting her head. Me? What about me? Why couldn't you sleep? Oh. Dan could feel that familiar instinct to shut down coming on. He didn't want to darken the mood even more with a detailed retelling of his dream. Still, Abby had shared something private with him, and her eyes looked so big and sad. A fair trade seemed only right. I had a nightmare. Like falling or drowning? Sort of. No, not really. But he decided he couldn't tell her about the dream after all. Not that dream, and not the ones he usually had either. She would think he was too strange, and her opinion mattered a lot to him. So all he said was, it was just the kind where you feel so powerless? Yeah. I know the feeling. That's how it is with my parents, too. Nothing I can do, and it totally blows. She took a breath and then said, you know, as weird as it sounds, I feel kind of better now. I don't usually talk about this stuff. What about Jordan? I thought you two were tight. No, I mean, yes, well, sure, but I'm more his confidant. His situation is so screwed up, I don't want to burden him with my problems too much. It doesn't seem right, piling more on top of him. They sat in companionable silence. The grass at the foot of the trees was tall, and pale tendrils of mist wove through the overgrown tufts before fanning out across the lawn. The darkness was lifting slowly as dawn came. You're a good listener, Dan. You've got this whole wise vibe going on. Thank you, Dan smiled. Wait, isn't that Buddha stuff? Wait, this isn't that Buddha stuff again, is it? Because that seriously did not feel like a compliment. Abby laughed, and for a second Dan really did feel like he had helped. Jordan definitely could have phrased that better, but I think he was onto something. Still smiling, she scooted closer to him on the stoop. The feathers in her hair were gone, leaving her massive black curls falling unevenly over one shoulder. For a moment, he thought she was about to kiss him, and he knew then and there he would ask her out on a date. So, she said, you want to know my trip for getting to sleep? Go for it. So I close my eyes, right? I mean, that's a given, but I close my eyes and relax, and I pretend I'm a tree. Dan snorted, shrugging away when Abby smacked him on his shoulder. A tree? Shut up, it works. Uh-huh, sure it does. Fine, smarty pants. I'm not going to tell you my secret then. Abby crossed her arms and made a sound. No, please, continue. Come on. I want to know more about being a tree. Laughter bubbled up through his words, no matter how hard he tried to clamp down on it. I'm not telling you now. Abby, please. Okay, but only because I like you. Dan missed part of her next sentence because she had said she liked him. You picture your individual roots, picture them moving down through the soil, going deeper and deeper, focusing on each one after another, down, down, cool and safe and surrounded. Just listening to her describe it was relaxing. Then she reached over and gently pressed her thumbs to his temples. Every root moving through the earth, shifting the dirt, getting stronger. He stretched, enjoying the feeling that he could fall asleep. Ha, see? I told you it works. Not bad, branches. We should probably get back inside, she said, getting slowly to her feet and stretching. And don't call me branches. Acorn? Not funny. Whatever you say, branches. He covered a yawn. I'm serious, she glared. You call me branches and I'll call you Buddha. All right, fine, truce. Dan followed her inside and closed the door behind them. It automatically locked. They walked to Abby's floor. Well, night, Dan said, rocking on his heels. Night, and remember, Abby closed her eyes and struck a pose. Be the tree. I'll try, Dan said, watching her back as she headed off to her room. And alone in his room, Dan did try. But when he closed his eyes, the tree became a vine, and the vine became a shackle, and then it was the same nightmare all over again. And we will end at chapter 7. Thank you again for tuning in to Reading Time with Pickle. I apologize for my kitties, as they do get a bit jealous, like I said, and they're always curious and they want to know what we're reading, and I'm sure they do enjoy the story. Some of the weaknesses that I talked about earlier in this video, actually I can see some growth in this novel, mainly with the character development. What I really didn't like in chapter 4 and 5 was that they had just met and they're going on this adventure, and really everyone seems, in my opinion, everyone seemed so bland and cookie cutter. But now in these last 2 chapters that we read, we learned that Jordan is actually in a pretty difficult home situation. They're all actually, one similarity now that I think about it that they share is they are all in quite difficult family situations. Jordan with his parents and family who do not support his lifestyle, or rather really who he is, and trying to send him away to the Pray the Gay Away camp. And Jordan confides to Abby, whose parents are on the brink of divorce, and Abby confides in Dan, who I guess went through the foster system. He seems fortunate now, but there was some hint that in the past Dan's home life was not the greatest. Now, what's interesting is Jordan is confiding in Abby. Abby is confiding in Dan. Now, who's Dan going to confide in? And I kind of find this trail rather interesting. And I think it's good that they kind of develop the characters a bit more. One other interesting note that I have about characters is Felix. He's kind of always on the periphery. Dan never really talks to him too much, but Dan sees him and thinks, should I? But then decides against it. And when Dan had his nightmare, Felix was watching. I definitely think that Felix is going to be an important character later on. Right now, though, I think that it's important to note that although he's not playing a frontline role at the moment, he's constantly in Dan's periphery. So we'll leave it at that. There were, again, a few hints as to Dan being crazy and this actually being an asylum. I don't know what Abby or Jordan's connection to this is, but I kind of feel like in this connection with Dan being crazy and being in an asylum, Felix actually does have a connection. We'll see if that hypothesis plays out. For now, my webcam is sliding off, so I will end this episode at that. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great night, everyone. And I hope you tune into the next chapters, starting at chapter 8.